The morning began, as so many mornings did in the Piton household, with Lady Piton's nerves in a state of collapse. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest and announced to the sitting room, which was currently empty, that no one could possibly understand the suffering she endured as a mother, the anxiety, the waiting, the constant disappointment. And where, she demanded aloud, was Rosalind? Rosalind was never where she ought to be. Lady Cordelia Piton, the eldest daughter and widely acknowledged beauty of the family, stood before the gilt-framed mirror above the mantel. She adjusted a golden curl with practiced ease and replied without turning. "Rosalind is at the hospital again, Mama. She told you this morning." Lady Piton sniffed. "Rosalind told me many things. That does not mean I am required to listen." She unfolded the letter clutched in her hand for what must have been the 14th time in an hour. The paper was already soft from handling. The script was elegant, too elegant. It announced that the Duke of Thornfield wished to call upon the Piton family regarding a matter of matrimonial interest. "Girls," Lady Piton said sharply, as if struck by inspiration, "do you comprehend what this means?" Lady Beatrice, the second daughter, looked up from her embroidery with her usual anxious expression. "It means we must change into our receiving gowns and bring out the good china." Lady Margaret, the third daughter and the most practical of them all, folded her arms. "It means someone has finally noticed we exist. Though I cannot imagine why a duke would concern himself with our family when he could have anyone in England. Margaret, really." Lady Piton fixed her with a look of deep disappointment. "Your father may not have been an earl, but he was the son of a marquis's second cousin. Our bloodline is impeccable." She hesitated at the word circumstances, a subject she disliked deeply. The late Lord Piton had been charming and kind and disastrously bad with money. Their genteel poverty was London's worst-kept secret. "Our circumstances are no concern of a duke," Lady Piton finished briskly. "What matters is that he is coming here to meet my daughters." "3 of your daughters?" Margaret muttered. "Rosalind will do as she is told for once," Lady Piton snapped. "Cordelia, wear the primrose silk. Beatrice, stop fidgeting. Margaret, try not to speak." The next 2 hours passed in frantic preparation. The drawing room was dusted and rearranged repeatedly. The good china was brought out. Flowers were replaced. Curtains were adjusted to hide worn carpet and flatter complexions. A footman was sent to the Foundling Hospital with an urgent message for Rosalind. At precisely 3 o'clock, the knocker sounded. Lady Piton clutched Beatrice's arm. Cordelia arranged her face into serene beauty. Margaret positioned herself where the light was weakest and prepared to be ignored. The butler announced the Duke of Thornfield. The man who entered seemed to carry winter with him. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in flawless dark restraint. His hair was black, touched with silver at the temples. His face was severe and handsome, but it was his eyes that silenced the room. Gray and cold, they assessed everything without warmth. Lady Piton nearly lost her balance in her curtsy. "Thank you for receiving me," the Duke said. His voice was cool and precise. Tea was served, conversation attempted. Cordelia spoke of the season. The Duke answered briefly. Beatrice tried music and faltered. Margaret remained silent. Finally, the Duke set down his cup. "I prefer efficiency, Lady Piton. I require a wife. My title demands an heir. I intend to marry before the season ends." Lady Piton made a small sound of delight. "I have selected your family for practical reasons," the Duke continued. "Your bloodline is respectable. Your daughters appear healthy. Your financial position suggests my offer will be welcome." Silence followed. "I do not promise affection," he said calmly. "I offer security. In exchange, I require fidelity, discretion, and an heir." He surveyed the 3 daughters as though they were interchangeable. "I will marry any of your daughters. Choose among yourselves. I will return in 3 days." It was at that moment the door opened. Rosalind Piton walked in late. She wore a plain gray dress marked with the evidence of work. Her hair had escaped its pins. Her cheeks were flushed from rushing. She looked around the room and frowned. "What is going on?" Lady Piton forced a smile. "Rosalind, darling. May I present the Duke of Thornfield?" Rosalind curtsied minimally. "I was told there was an emergency. "There is," the Duke said. "I have proposed marriage to your family." Rosalind stared at him. "You have done what?" "I require a wife," he said patiently. "Any of you will suffice." Something in Rosalind snapped. "Let me be certain I understand," she said calmly. "You have entered this house and spoken of marriage as though ordering furniture. You examine my sisters as livestock, and you expect gratitude." The room froze. "Marriage is not a transaction, Your Grace. It is not ownership. It is not breeding." The Duke's eyes hardened. "Romantic ideals do not feed families," he said. "Love did not save my parents. It destroyed them." "Then perhaps love was not the problem," Rosalind replied. "Perhaps cruelty was." Lady Piton gasped. "You are either a fool or a monster," Rosalind said, her voice steady, "and I cannot yet decide which." Silence crashed down. The Duke studied her, something unreadable in his gaze. "I will return in 3 days," he said at last. "Good day." He left. Lady Piton crossed the room and struck Rosalind across the face. "You have ruined us," she hissed. Rosalind did not cry. That evening, a letter arrived. It bore the Duke's seal. "I will not marry any of your daughters," it read. "I will marry Lady Rosalind, only her." Rosalind read it twice. Her hands trembled, and for the first time in her life, she did not know whether refusing would be braver than accepting the letter burned in Rosalind's hands. Long after the butler had left the room, she read it again, slower this time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less impossible. But they did not. The Duke of Thornfield would marry only her. He would give her 1 week to decide. He promised honesty, respect, and freedom within the bounds of propriety. He promised no love. Her mother wept. Cordelia went pale. Beatrice trembled. Margaret said nothing at all. That night, Rosalind did not sleep. She lay awake listening to the quiet creaks of the house, thinking of gray eyes and cold certainty, and the strange spark she had seen beneath it all. She told herself again and again that she would refuse. She had to. A marriage without love was a prison, no matter how gilded. By the 3rd day, she had written her refusal. It was short, polite, final. The Duke's reply arrived the next morning. He did not accept it. He would call at 3. Rosalind nearly laughed with disbelief. One could not simply refuse to accept a refusal. Yet there it was, written in his precise hand. At 3 o'clock exactly, he stood in the drawing room again, looking as if nothing in the world had ever challenged him. Rosalind entered without ceremony. "You cannot simply ignore my answer," she said. "I am not ignoring it," he replied. "I am disputing it," they argued, quietly at first. Then, with heat, he spoke of honesty. She spoke of fear. He admitted he had been wrong to believe any woman would do. She accused him of wanting control disguised as reason. At last, she demanded proof. "Come to the Foundling Hospital," she said. "See the world I live in. Then, tell me you still wish to marry me." He agreed without hesitation. The next morning he arrived at the hospital dressed plainly. He did not flinch at dirt or noise or sickness. He listened. He asked questions. He learned names. He stayed. Rosalind watched him with growing confusion. He returned the next day, and the next. He read to children. He helped in the kitchens. He held the hand of a dying girl and did not turn away when she passed. "You should not have done that," Rosalind told him afterward. "It is not proper." "Someone should remember her," he said. Slowly, the frost began to crack. He told her of his parents, of love turned bitter, of vows broken by disappointment, of the decision he had made long ago to feel nothing rather than risk pain. She told him of her sister's marriage, of charm that became cruelty, of fear learned too young. Something changed between them. He asked for time, not obedience. She asked for space, not promises. Then gossip came. Whispers followed Rosalind through drawing rooms and down corridors. Impropriety, scandal, shame. The Duke wrote to her at once.
"We should marry immediately," he said. "It will silence them."
For the first time, she hesitated not from anger, but from doubt. That night, Margaret told her the truth. Lord Ashby was behind the rumors. Eleonora arrived pale and shaking, her voice flat as she confessed her husband's cruelty, his pleasure in destroying, his interest in Rosalind. Rosalind understood then. The Duke's proposal and rescue, no matter how kind, was still pressure. She ran. Before dawn, she left London in a hired carriage, her heart breaking with every mile. She left a letter behind, apologizing, explaining, begging him not to follow. She told herself she needed time. She told herself she was protecting her heart. In Devon, she found refuge with her former governess, who listened and waited, and finally spoke the truth. "You are afraid of being wrong," the woman said, "and fear has made your choice for you." Rosalind wept. On the fourth day, there was a knock at the door. Not polite, not patient. The Duke of Thornfield stood on the threshold, travel worn and furious and devastated. "You ran," he said, "after everything." She tried to explain. Fear spilled out of her in broken pieces. He told her what her leaving had done to him, how he had blamed himself, how he had learned the truth and ridden across England anyway. "You taught me to open my heart," he said, "and then you proved I was foolish to do so." She broke then, truly broke. "I love you," she said. "I was terrified of that love." He went still. Then he said it too. "I love you. I always have." They stood in the small cottage, stripped of pride and certainty, and chose each other again. He asked her to marry him, not to save her, not to silence scandal, but because life without her was unthinkable. She said yes. The next morning, in a small stone church, they were married, with no grandeur and no audience, just truth. When they returned to London, the Duke destroyed the scandal at its source. Ashby fell. Eleonora was freed. Marriage was not perfect, they argued. They learned. They faltered, but they stayed. Years later, Rosalind watched her children run through the gardens of Thornfield Abbey and smiled. The Duke, once frozen by fear, laughed freely now, and she knew love had not destroyed them. Love had saved them. They returned to London quietly, without announcement or celebration. There were no grand carriages lined with flowers, no crowds waiting to admire the new Duchess of Thornfield. Rosalind preferred it that way. She had not married for spectacle. She had married for truth. The city noticed anyway. People always did. At first, there were whispers, then questions, then sudden smiles filled with curiosity rather than judgment. The impossible Piton girl had married the Frost-Duke. Not Cordelia with her beauty, not Beatrice with her gentle manners, not Margaret with her sense. Rosalind, the one who had argued with him, the one who had walked out late and spoken too honestly. Sebastian made no effort to soften the surprise. He appeared beside Rosalind at every gathering, his hands steady at her back, his voice calm and unyielding when anyone dared hint at scandal. He introduced her as his wife with quiet pride, and people learned quickly that the cold authority he once used to keep the world at a distance was now used to protect her. Lady Piton cried when they arrived at the family house. She cried from relief, from fear released too late, from the shock of seeing her youngest daughter standing tall beside a duke who looked at her as though the rest of the world had dimmed. "I was wrong," Lady Piton admitted that night, her voice small. "I thought practicality was the only way to survive. I forgot that courage has its own strength." Rosalind hugged her mother without judgment. They had both done the best they could with what they knew. Cordelia accepted the marriage with graceful distance. Beatrice clung to Rosalind with tearful affection. Margaret smiled and said only that she had never doubted Rosalind would choose the hardest path. Life at Thornfield Abbey was not what Rosalind expected. It was quieter than London, but not cold. The stone walls that once echoed with silence now filled with conversation. Servants learned quickly that the Duchess noticed everything, not with suspicion, but with care. Wages improved. Conditions changed. Children laughed where once they had whispered. Sebastian watched it all with a mixture of awe and humility. "You changed my house," he told her one evening as they walked through the gardens. "No," she replied. "I reminded it how to breathe." Marriage did not erase old wounds. There were days Sebastian withdrew, his voice distant, his eyes clouded with memories he could not yet name. There were days Rosalind pushed too hard, afraid of silence, afraid of losing ground she had fought so fiercely to gain. But they spoke. When anger rose, they faced it. When fear whispered, they named it. When old habits returned, they called each other back. Slowly, they learned that love was not the fire that burned everything in its path. It was the warmth that stayed. The Duke's enemies did not forgive easily. Lord Ashby's fall left bitterness behind. His debts and cruelty were exposed, his power dissolved. Eleanor was freed from him at last, and when she came to Thornfield, thin and uncertain, Rosalind welcomed her without question. "You saved me," Eleanor said once. "No," Rosalind replied. "You survived. We simply stood beside you. The world adjusted. It always did. Seasons passed. Scandals faded. New ones replaced them. And then, quietly, life grew larger. A child's cry echoed through Thornfield Abbey one winter morning, strong and demanding. Sebastian stood frozen beside the bed, his face pale, his hand gripping Rosalind's as though letting go might undo everything. When the baby was placed in his arms, something inside him finally broke open. He wept. Not the silent, contained tears of duty, but open sobs of relief and awe and fear and love, all tangled together. "Our son," he whispered. Rosalind watched him and understood something profound. This was not a man healed by marriage. This was a man healed by choice, by staying, by learning that love did not have to destroy in order to be real. Years followed, marked by children's footsteps in long halls and laughter in rooms once quiet. Rosalind never became the sort of Duchess society expected. She still spoke too honestly, still spent too much time at hospitals and schools, still challenged men who mistook politeness for authority. Sebastian never asked her to change. He changed with her. They argued sometimes in the evenings, voices low but fierce, then laughed at themselves for caring so deeply. They disagreed. They failed. They apologized. They grew. One summer afternoon, Rosalind stood on the terrace watching Sebastian teach their children a game he barely understood himself. He looked up, caught her watching, and smiled. Not the cold smile of the Duke of Thornfield, but the easy, open smile of a man at peace. She thought back to that first afternoon, the drawing room, the insult, the frost in his eyes. She had walked in late. She had spoken out of turn. She had refused to be chosen like an object, and in doing so, she had changed the course of both their lives. Sebastian joined her on the terrace and took her hand. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For walking in late." She smiled. Some doors only open when someone arrives exactly when they are not expected. They stood together as the sun dipped low, their children laughing below, the past no longer a shadow but a foundation. Love had not come to them easily, but it had come honestly, and that was enough.